asked to do this talk, I have plenty of books, and I'm sure you guys have books that say the art and science of teaching, right? There are tons of them out there. And there's no way I was going to name this the art and science of teaching. And that's not the, we're going to talk about the art, and we're going to talk about the science, but not the way you think. By the way, this picture, right, anybody know what this is? This is the School of Athens, painted by Raphael. All the great philosophers and thinkers are in there. Giant mural. And that painting I love, but we're not going to go that way. We're not going to do that art and science of teaching. We're going to do this art and science of teaching. That's a brainbow. Okay, that's neurons colored with proteins that happen inside your head when you activate your brain. That's from the hippocampus, by the way. And you all make that art happen in the classroom with your students. You make that happen. That's what this talk is about today. It's about what you do to make that art occur. And we're going to focus on that. And this is how we're going to focus. So I'm going to zoom out. That's a close-up of the hippocampus. That is the hippocampus and cortex. You can see the zoom out, right? So I'm going to give you kind of the big picture of where we're going with this talk. Promise it's only 15 slides. We'll get through this, no problem. Mostly pictures as well. But words for me are the colors that I paint in terms of what I see in the world. And Scarlett knows this, I think in quotes a lot. I have too many quotes in my head. Words paint those pictures for me. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use the vibrant colors of the words of quotes that we have hung or in our drawers, because a couple of my favorite teaching quotes were in my drawers, that we have hanging around or in our drawers. And those words reflect why we teach for many of us, but the science reflects why those words are right. And not enough of us know what's happening up here when we pick those inspirational words, those quotes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some of those posters on the left-hand side of your screen. And then, because I can't help but think in words, I brought some books that give you a little taste of what we're talking about in terms of the science, and also where you can go to get some of these books. And by the way, I am not getting a cut of any of these books. All right, these are books I think all educators at all levels should know and have. So I want you to walk away with your Amazon list being built. And I'm going to do it through what I call the 7 E's. And straight up, that's from my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Peck. When I put together this talk, I tried to summon my inner Mrs. P. She was the teacher of all teachers. I wish I had a teacher like her every single year. She turned a C student into a straight A who graduated top of his class. She, in 1 year, I can tell you every little aspect about that classroom. I could tell you the way she smelled. I could tell you the way she talked. I could tell you everything about her. She just passed last year. But those words, expectations, energize, empower, encourage, embrace, the environment she created, and how she elevated all of us, that's Mrs. P. And every time I step in front of a classroom, for me, I try to make those butterflies go away by thinking of Mrs. P. So we're going to take a little journey together on the science of artful teaching through Mrs. P. First off, high expectations. This was in Mrs. P's class. Nobody rises to low expectations. And the book that I want to highlight is Give and Take by Adam Grant. Adam Grant is the youngest professor at the Wharton School of Business ever at UPenn. And he wrote this great book called Give and Take. It's for the business world, but there's so much in it for education, and you're going to see that in a second. It's so cool. It's so amazing. It takes you on a ride. Every time he gives a business example, I couldn't help but think of a teacher that had a profound impact on me. If people like you. And one study he mentions on pages 98 to 99 is the famous Robertson and Jacobson study of 1966. It's still creating an uproar. 1966 was a great year, not just because I was born, but it was a great year. And that study was amazing. Jacobson was a principal, an elementary school principal in San Francisco. Robertson, Harvard professor. They got together. Jacobson offered up 18 of her classrooms of K through fifth grade. And what they did is they gave a Harvard cognitive ability test to those students, K through 5. Come to find out, 20% of those students taking the test were labeled bloomers, that they would intellectually blossom into amazing intellectual creatures. And so they ran this survey. They gave that information to the teachers. And sure enough, that 20% in the first grade scored 15 IQ, all of them, 15 IQ points higher than the 80% that are out there. In the second grade, it was 10 points. They kept exceeding the IQ. Now this is the kicker. Robertson randomly picked that 20%. There was no real study. The teachers, this is what Adam Grant writes about the study. You don't think you have an effect on students? Oh. Teachers' beliefs created self-fulfilling prophecies. When teachers believed their students were bloomers, they set high expectations for their success. As a result, the teachers engaged in more supportive behaviors that boosted the students' confidence and enhanced their learning and development. Teachers communicated more warmly to the bloomers, gave them more challenging assignments, called on them more often, and provided them with more feedback. You create the art in your students. You can create those neurons that go beautifully crazy, or you can set those low expectations and just have a flat line all the way around. Why we teach? There's so many reasons, but it's to give also those students the ability to succeed at the next level. All of them can succeed. All of them are bloomers. And we seem to forget that. But in 1966, that study was done, and it's still creating waves. It should be read by every single educator in every single college education classroom, because they shouldn't leave that classroom without knowing that study. And I just found it, by the way, Scarlett, that study in its book, The Pygmalion Effect, at the Newtown Public Library book sale. I was so excited, because I'm trying to get my hands on that original manuscript. And I did yesterday. All right. Energized passion connections. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And I'm going to start right from Descartes' era. This book, you had Phineas Cage earlier this morning. It starts off with Phineas Cage. But listen to this. The new proposal in Descartes' era is that the reasoning system evolved as an extension of the automatic emotional system. The reasoning system, right, started off as an automatic of the emotional system, with emotion playing diverse roles in the reasoning process. For example, emotion may increase the saliency of a premise, and in so doing, bias the conclusion in favor of the premise. Emotion also assists with the process of holding in mind the multiple facts that must be considered in order to reach a decision. In other words, emotion is the basis of rationality. And for me, who is and always will be a Star Trek fan, that blew Spock out of the water. Right? Spock, supposedly rationality, logic, you exclude emotion. You heard this morning as well from the Hahn Foundation that social and emotional learning are just as important. Well, Damasio, one of the leading neuroscientists in the freaking world, says yes, that's the case. And it starts with emotion. Your rationality, your reasoning starts with emotion. And if you don't think social and emotional learning are an important foundation for intellectual development, well then you need to challenge all of the neuroscience that's right in front of you. We need to have a balanced, holistic education that weaves intellectual development and curiosity with social and emotional learning. If we don't, we handicap our students. And for us, we're not about handicapping, we're about energizing their passion, right? And how does a brain learn? Pick up any neuroscience book. It's about connections. Guys, when you look with your eyes, you do not see the world with your eyes. You see it with your brain. It's about the connection of neurons, the axons, the glial, which supports the neurons. That's what gives us the world and the pictures that we see in the world. We need to energize that passion, those connections. And how do we do it? Well, there's a bunch of great projects out there, and I'm just going to pick one, the passion projects. That came off of the Google idea of the Genius Hour. And what some California schools are doing is that they're giving either once a day or once a week an hour where students can pursue their passions. This is where we got Google Mail, by the way. This is where new ideas come out all the time. I just received an email from one of the juniors at Harvard about a new project they're doing because they were given extra time in a class. And they asked me if I wanted to participate in it. I don't know what the project is, so I haven't said yes yet. But the idea is that you've got to allow the passion to develop, to grow. You can't just think, okay, I'm giving the assignment, and they'll get it, I know it. No, it's about cultivating it, right? And that the business world has picked up on in terms of the passion projects in Genius Hour. Empower. By the way, this quote, I've seen this poster a number of times. It's not Einstein. People think it's Feynman, and Feynman did not treat women very well, by the way. You do not really understand something unless you can explain it to your grandmother. Well, one of the things that students know in my class, I use debate a lot. The one thing you can't use is grandmothers. Grandmothers make the world go round. They're off limits. You can talk about someone's mama, right? You can talk about anybody else, but you can't talk about grandmas. Grandmas are off the table. Grandmas are crucial to the spinning of the world. But for this quote, for me, it's really about that explanation. And in Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect, great book by Lieberman, right? He gets into learning for teaching. And he shows you that when students of all stripes, not just your top students, but all students are challenged to teach the rest of the class, they actually learn the material better. And this is what he says. As you can tell, I'm making pretend we're in class here. So, putting this all together, it is plausible that the dopamine released during feelings of social reward promotes more effective prefrontal control during classroom activities, leading to higher grades. That's that social connection. Now here, think about this learning for teaching. Those learning the material in order to teach it performed better on what to them was a surprise memory test, compared to those who knew the memory test was coming and had studied for it. You guys get that? They didn't know there was a memory test coming, but they had to teach the class. They scored better than the students who actually knew that there was a memory test coming. Any advantage they showed had to be due to the social motivation present while learning the material. They were told, the students were told, that you're there to help the other students. That's crucial. That's social emotional learning. They were there to help. As soon as you tied learning to material to helping someone else, they learned it better, he argues in Wired to Connect. Right? This idea of social motivations, this idea of compassion, for example. When they go into classrooms, there's, especially in the lower grades, compassion is a no-brainer. But as soon as you get up, especially, and as Scarlett pointed out, into college, what do you mean? We've got to check this out. What religion are you? right? And what was funny, and still is that I get so many people say, oh, Kukk, he's a Buddhist, he's into compassion. Just for the record, I'm Roman Catholic, right? But I don't let them know, because they're painting their world the way they see it. I'd rather them learn that I'm not, and understand that the role of compassion in this world, and we're going to get into it a little bit, is so profound we sometimes forget. It's not, have you hugged your dolphin today? Right? Have you hugged your tree today? It is so much more. Encourage persistence. Strength. A river cuts through rock, not because of its power, but its persistence. Mr. Khan. That's Mr. Khan's class from 6th grade. And everyone knows about, at least by now, Angela Duckworth's work, right, on grit. And Paul Tough, How Children Succeed, I argue, is probably one of the most important books on grit and persistence and curiosity in all grades. And Scarlett has made fun of my book because it's so labeled in so many different ways. But I want to get into a 1970 test and then a 2012 test by a graduate student at the University of Rochester to get into this idea of why this matters so much and why we should encourage that persistence. In a famous marshmallow test in 1970 out in California, and you guys know this one, right? Right? Did you know the kid test in 2012? Yeah, that's the problem. Right? It's like reading Darwin. If you read On the Origins of Species, you miss 99% of Darwin, especially the descent of man. Darwin actually did not believe in survival of the... He did not. By the way, I have his books, if you don't believe me, on my iPad, and we can look at them together. He said that the species with the greatest number of its members having sympathy or compassion or altruism will actually more efficiently and effectively move up the evolutionary ladder than those who are self-centered and selfish. So if you read, like I did, and that's why I want my 6th grade science education back, we just read On the Origins of Species. I challenge you to read the rest of Darwin, like all of it, and find one spot where he says survival of the fittest is right. Matter of fact, in The Descent of Man, he says it's incorrect. And he thanks the 2 scientists who pointed it out to him in The Descent of Man, by the way. And this is the same thing with the marshmallow test. Right? In the marshmallow test, 2 groups of students were set up. Right? They each had a marshmallow, and the marshmallow was placed in front of them. And they said, the researcher said, if you can wait 15 minutes, you'll get another marshmallow. And about half or so could wait. And then they followed those students later in life. And those students who could wait did exceedingly better in every level of life. Personal relationships, professional careers, you name it. Those people who had the grit, who had the persistence, who could wait that 15 minutes to grab those, and they were like 5-year-olds, by the way. My 6-year-old, when it's chocolate, like that Han Foundation thing, no way. He'd find a way to convince you all to look that way while he grabbed the bag. And tell you that right now. But the idea is that it was believed that if you could wait, and that's innate, then you're going to succeed. Well, Celeste Kidd, in 2012, and a group of her colleagues at the University of Rochester decided, wait a minute, there's something wrong. Because when you look at the socioeconomic backgrounds of those kids, it says that all the poor kids in the urban districts can't wait. No, there's something wrong here. Sure enough, Celeste Kidd put a little twist on it, that everyone who knows the marshmallow test should read that study. What she did, she said, it's got to be the environment. It's not just nature, it's also nurture, right? It's this idea of encouraging persistence, and it matters as teachers how you encourage that. And this is how she did it. She put the students in the 2 different groups, and this is the twist. She put an adult in one group who broke 3 promises in 5 minutes. The other group got an adult that kept the promises, all 3 of them. Which one do you think could wait? Which group? 9 out of the 14 waited in the group that where the adult kept the promises. 1 of the 14 waited. The environment matters. It had nothing to do with being poor. It had everything to do with the environment that they were around. You can create that environment, right? And we're going to get that out a little bit more. But everyone who knows, and many of you did, the Michelle Marshmallow test, better well know that Celeste Kidd research. You can encourage it. Embrace compassion. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. And I got to tell you this right now. I'm a huge fan of his. I am Roman Catholic, but I'm a huge fan. He also gave the Center for Compassion, Creativity, and Innovation that Scarlett talked about. He started us off with a $107,000 grant to kickstart that. So he's amazing in so many different ways. But this book, he calls himself Paul Zak, the neuroeconomist. And if you're interested into getting a deeper understanding of why some countries, while some parts of the country develop faster than others, this book gets into it, not only in terms of politics, but also in terms of neuroscience. And I'm going to start with the second part, the internal versus instrumental values, because compassion falls into that internal value compared to instrumental. And we, as teachers, can build that up. Internal values are basically values that you hold no matter what the benefits or costs. Patriotism is one. I was a counterintelligence agent during the Cold War before I became a professor. And I wanted to serve this country. My dad literally came over on a boat. And I wanted to give back to this country because they accepted my dad and my grandparents here. And for me, that red, white, and blue flag means so much to me in so many different ways. I would gladly give my life for this country. Compassion is the same thing. No matter what the costs, no matter what the benefits, you pursue it. Instrumental values are those values you pursue because there is a benefit to you, or you avoid it because there's a cost. For example, you're going to go for a job because it pays more money. That's an instrumental value. Well, a brand new study was covered in the New York Times by the National Academy of Sciences, looked at several thousand West Point cadets over a period of years. And they found out, interesting enough, that those cadets who did the best and went the furthest in the military, they had and subscribed to internal values like compassion, not instrumental. But this is the kicker. If you had internal and instrumental, you still were below the radar. Those driven by internal, and I have the study here for those of you who want to see it afterwards, internal values led to greater success than those people looking to achieve that success. There's a nice paradox for you. All the way across the board. And now that takes me to, that was recently, that was, let's see, some of you are writing it down, so let me see if I have that handy. That was July 4th, by the way. Perfect day, right? It's called The Secret of Effective Motivation. Paul Zak gets into the peptide hormone called oxytocin. And he shows us that when you think in a compassionate way, you release that peptide hormone. When you have dark chocolate, by the way, not milk chocolate, dark chocolate, it releases oxytocin. Scarlett knows for me it's chocolate milk. And unfortunately her mom, they all know, no matter where I go, I have chocolate milk. I'm a chocolate milk freak. And that releases a lot of oxytocin for me. So, also, hugging. Even if someone who doesn't want the hug, you give them a hug, they release oxytocin. And we're going to get into why that matters for the fact that, let's just go to it right now. This is the neuroscience of compassion and how it works. By the way, this takes basically Paul Zach's work on the left-hand side, and in the middle, this takes Sean Akers' work on the right-hand side and slams them together. Basically, if you think in terms of compassion, which is very different than empathy, by the way. Empathy does not do this. Let me be clear. Compassion and empathy are not the same thing. And there are plenty of studies that show you how, in terms of fMRIs, when you think in terms of empathy versus compassion, different parts of the brain light up. And cheat sheet, compassion, the same parts of the brain light up for love, when you're in love with somebody, when it's right type of love, you know what I mean? Now, that's kind of cascading, out of control, ridiculous. Oh, no, I'm going to die without them. It's that, right, that real, no matter what, that you love them, you'd rather be, if they left you just because they were happier, you'd be still loving them. That type of love, right? Compared to empathy. Empathy lights up the same parts of the brain as pain. You want to talk about burnout? It's not compassion burnout. It's empathy burnout. And I go into another talk into that. But this, compassion, releases the peptide hormone oxytocin, which then releases and triggers dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine's that brain reward idea, right? You want to do it again and again. Right? Serotonin reduces anxiety. Guys, that, taking Sean Akers' work, The Happiness Advantage, I should have put that up there somewhere along the line. It is a great book. And he shows you how that change, simply just switching into that mindset, gives you happiness, optimism, which then leads to success. Right? Is it depressed, negative people moving towards success? Or is it the optimistic happiness? You can create environments for that. Teachers have done that. Mrs. P done that. Many of you do that. The environment for learning. Teachers who love teaching teach children to love learning. This, I think, is the most important for me. You know, in the flipped classroom, one of my boys is now looking online at some of the information, and without me telling him, is taking notes and getting into it more and more. That he's loving learning. That, once you do that, it takes off. And an environment of the love of learning, right, reduces cortisol. So let me just get to that on 178, because this is pretty amazing. It says here, and this is John Medina from Brain Rules. If the stress is too severe or too prolonged, however, stress begins to harm learning. The influence can be devastating. Chronic stress hurts our ability to learn. Specifically, stress hurts declarative memory, things you can declare, and executive function, the type of thinking that involves problem solving. Those, of course, are the skills needed to excel in school and business. And he goes on to look at cortisol levels to explain what he's talking about that. And that passage gives you an essence of where Medina is going, and he's a molecular neuroscience biologist, by the way, who writes so that everyone can understand, which you won't come across very many of those. He's pretty amazing. But I want to talk about new studies that are out there recently on the gene DRD4. If you don't know DRD4, you will know DRD4, and it comes initially from Sweden. And people with the long variant of DRD4, and the long variant means they produce low dopamine. Okay? And educational neuroscience is now using the Swedish model to analyze students. And they're grouping, although I don't like to group students in twos, this is what they're doing. They're calling students with the long variant of DRD4, the low dopamine, as orchids. And those students with regular dopamine levels as dandelions. Those dandelions can grow in any type of environment. They'll succeed in any type of environment. The orchids need a special. They need that warm, caring, compassionate environment inside the classroom. And this is the kicker, because I think it was 2 years ago, the first study came out, and it was like a Celeste Kidd finding. It found out that if the entire classroom was set up in a compassionate, positive environment, right? Guys, we've had teachers, I've had Mrs. P who did that, and I've had other teachers who I was deathly afraid. First grade, I'm going to be straight up, Catholic school, nuns, ruler, knuckles. I was deathly afraid to go to school. And Mrs. P turned that all around for me. Now I'm in school professionally for life. Thanks, Mrs. P. The orchids surpass the dandelions in intellectual ability in a compassionate, positive environment. So what was thought to hinder advancement and success in the right environment gives them an advantage and catches up to the dandelions. DRD4, guys, you can find this in the Wall Street Journal. You can find this in popular press. It's starting to pop up more and more. And I write about it a lot. My last blog entry was about the orchids and dandelions, actually. All right. So you create that environment for learning. Whoops. Finally, elevate. One of the greatest just passed away. And this world is missing something really important. Right? She said, Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I'm going to tell you right now, one of the best moments of my teaching life was with Scarlett in Hawaii. When we were talking to an entire school, and those kids coming up afterwards, and the way they felt, explaining the way we made them feel, made me feel more oxytocin than I've ever felt in my life. It was amazing. And there's usually this picture of a heart, Scarlett and I standing in the center of it, that the kids made of their bodies and us together. It was that environment. What we did mattered to them. That's what they remember. And what you do in the classroom, they remember more than anything else. Right? Think about it. When you were in the classroom, you used to, I know you did, because we all did it somewhere along, or you watched someone do it. You imitated somebody, right? Anybody that imitated Mrs. P, I went after them compassionately. But you don't mess with Mrs. P, no matter what, right? And here, Jonathan Haidt actually he's at NYU, has done years upon years of this idea of elevation. And I didn't know this about Jefferson until I read The Happiness Hypothesis. But listen to this. This is truly amazing. He talks about Jefferson and this idea of elevation. This is Jonathan Haidt. Jefferson went on to say that the physical feelings and motivational effects caused by great literature, get that, great literature, as powerful as those caused by real events. He considered the example of contemporary French play, asking whether the fidelity and generosity of its hero does not dilate the reader's breast and elevate his sentiments as much as any similar incident which real history can furnish. Does the reader not in fact feel himself a better man while reading them, and privately covenant to copy the fair example? This extraordinary statement is more than just poetic description of the joys of reading. It is also the precise scientific definition of an emotion. Then he says here below, for the past 7 years, I've been studying elevation in my lab. Jefferson got it exactly right. People really do respond emotionally to acts of moral beauty. And these emotional reactions involve warm or pleasant feelings in the chest and conscious desires to help others or become a better person oneself. He's finding that out. Great literature. You can think about the great literature that you love and what that does to you and the passion that brings to you. And if you do that in your classroom, how much more they learn. They absorb. They take. That's you. That rainbow, that's you painting that environment, that elevation, right? And You don't buy Jefferson. I know Jefferson had some problems, right? Go to the Atlantic Monthly. You can find this stuff everywhere. There's a great study. I call it Altitude and Attitude. And what they did is they went to North Carolina Mall, and they had the Salvation Army tins placed at escalators going up and escalators going down. And what did they find? People were twice as generous going up. Not only did they give more, they gave more often than going down. So if you guys lead Girl Scout troops, you know where you want to put your cookies? Yeah, at the top of that escalator, for sure. You're going to sell more of those and get those squared away. But then they went a little further. They said, wait a minute, this attitude thing, it just might be a spurious correlation. So what they did is they put people in seats, had them look at images of looking out an airplane window, and then had images looking out of a car window. Guess who was more generous? Just by looking outside of an image looking outside the window. Made people more generous. We can do that in how we act. What you do inside that classroom, guys, has such a profound impact that we sometimes forget that when we have those mornings, like Maya, right, was talking about, sometimes we've got to put them behind us because of those little faces in front of us. Now, for me, this way I see education, we're going to do a little brain game here. I love that National Geographic show, Brain Games. If you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, because now you're going to become addicted to brain games. And I don't even have cable anymore. I have Roku, so I have to wait for it to come out on the National Geographic side. And I guess tonight, one of my buddies called me and said, tonight's going to be about compassion on brain games. And I have to wait. Education. For me, it's a whole that cannot be described as a sum of its parts. I'm going to get into that in a second. And a teacher helps students see and understand something that is difficult to describe. And that bottom quote is by a book I haven't actually finished reading yet, by one of the greatest neuroscientists of our day. This is a tough read. It's not like Medina's, but it's powerful. Really powerful. And he says here, and this is where I think many of us are agreed, the more you know, the more you can know. And he shows, in terms of neuroscience, that's the case. And education, for me, it's not something that you can see in a classroom. It's not something you can put your finger on. It's something that then builds up inside you, right? It's not a teacher. It's not just Mrs. P. It was everyone else I had. And it gets to this image. Tell me, what do you see when I show you this? Just blurt it out. Pac-Man. Oh, one person went right to it. And a triangle. But usually people go right to Pac-Man. Now describe, what do you mean triangle? Describe that triangle. Like, how would you explain to a child who couldn't see it there?
I would say there's a triangle that's sitting on top of the 3 blue dots.
Perfect! That's a teacher. Because some kids cannot see that. Right? They see the Pac-Man. And but a teacher can show them something that they don't see that's there. Guys, that's you. Oh, by the way, I also think in music, so we're going to go back to the 80s a little bit for a one-hit wonder to end this all. But this is from the curriculum I developed called the Connected 5 C's, and it's from a 5th and 6th grade book, Connecting Space. And the reason I did space is that, and you guys can look this up yourself, that's all I did, is I looked at surveys from around the world of both boys and girls, and in the top 3 of no matter what ethnicity, what country you're from, what gender you're from, in the top 3 is space. They're interested in space. for me, I don't understand why our National Curriculum Committee didn't go where the kids are. If you go where the kids are, you can take them anywhere you want to go. But you've got to get them on board first, but you've got to get on board with them. And so what I did is I just went to space. And now, after meeting with Scarlett, and she was not kidding, it was that moment in my office, beyond a 30-second phone call, it was simply amazing. And for me, getting the idea of not just compassion, but after talking with Scarlett, also love. You don't talk about that. Oh, love. Yeah. You don't talk about that in class. Come on. Well, I'm going to show you how, through talking about dark matter and dark energy, you can easily talk about that. And by the way, if you know Common Core, you know that page is set up to Common Core specs, isn't it? Because what do you have to see data as? In two different forms, in two different ways. Every page of the book is set up so that a principal or a superintendent can check off their little Common Core lists, while you, in the classroom, can get back to teaching and the passion that you have initially for teaching. That's what I wanted. And I also started looking into it because I have 3 little boys, 6, 8, and 10. And I did not want them to go through what I called Every Child Left Behind, what many of us called Every Child. And I looked at Common Core, and I was afraid at first. And then when I saw what you could do with Common Core, I'm a fan of Common Core. I believe in it. And, we can talk about it later. My days as a counterintelligence agent, I got to travel the country and to see the different levels of education that happen in this country. All I could think of was Mark Twain's quote, "Out of the public schools grows the strength of this nation." And when more than half of the public schools couldn't meet the criteria of what happens in Connecticut, we need Common Core. And it shouldn't be a landing zone, though. It should be a launching pad. That's what it was set up to do. This curriculum that I'm trying to do is to bring back that launching pad mentality to Common Core. You don't go to Common Core to satisfy a test. You go to Common Core as a basis, as a foundation for education to build up a person. Scarlett knows, I say, you don't fill in blanks, you help fill up a person in a school. That's what we forgot. Common Core can get us there. Right? And this is set up for that. So basically, I don't know if you can see this, but on the left-hand side, oh, by the way, we can only see 5% of reality. That's all we can handle in our brain. 95% of reality, we don't see, people. We don't see the dark matter. We don't see the dark energy. 68% of reality is dark energy. 27% is dark matter. Dark matter is the stuff that keeps us together. Right? You're not disappearing right before our eyes. Right? Dark matter is the glue that keeps you together. Dark energy is the stuff that tries to take us apart. So in this book, in the curriculum, it explains to teachers a number of different ways you can get at compassion, love. But for example, one way to get at it, that no matter where you go in the world, even in Saturn or Jupiter or the moon, no matter where you are, no matter what inner city you're in, even if you see more bad in the world, the stuff that tries to tear us apart, the good that keeps us together, that's straight up fact, has to be twice as strong as the bad stuff that tries to tear us apart. Dark matter is twice as strong. Otherwise, Terry would be dissolving before our very eyes. So even if you turn on the news, even if you walk out your apartment building in a city and you see bad, this message and what the universe is telling us, less is more. There's less maybe in front of you of the good that keeps us together, but it's much more strong than the stuff that takes us apart. And you can get into discussions about that as the 5th and 6th grade levels. That's just one idea of how you can weave those together. And for upper level, I highly recommend, and I don't get a cut at this either, The Universe in a Single Atom by Dalai Lama. He weaves neuroscience into the study of science and what's in front of us in terms of also morality. And we're coming to a close here. When I was thinking of you all and I was thinking of Mrs. P, To me, you all and Mrs. P are artists and astronauts. On the first one, anybody know Thomas Dolby? Right, the song, "She blinded me with science," right, that one-hit wonder, right? Well, we're going to use Thomas Dolby. I hope today I didn't blind you with science. I hope that I inspired you with science, because to me, you are the people that help us as students explore who we become. You outline the possibilities for us. You take us into new directions that we maybe never have thought of before as a student. And for me, when I'm up in front, I'm always thinking as a student. To me, I think what made Mrs. P so special, she never stopped learning, not just from the books she read and the literature she signed us, but from us. I can't tell you how many times she said, "I never thought of that." And for a fifth grader who constantly got in trouble with his dad, that was simply awesome. Just those words, right? In this day and age, she'd probably get arrested because she'd spend 5 seconds massaging everybody on the back taking a test. I still hug. And then Thomas Dolby's, in part of that song, "Poetry in Motion," right? The idea that, like Mrs. P, many of you, you make the words come alive for us. You are a first example of poetry in motion to many students. She helped make me become the person I am today. You have that power. Every day you step in the classroom, no matter what happens at home. You provide us with the colors, those words that make us who we are. So not only do you help us become who we're going to be, but you color us with the people we are, with the assignments you create, how you do it, the way you go about doing it. Please, please don't forget that. And I'm going to end with a little cosmology and neuroscience together, because it took me a while to find these images, but this is so freaking cool. On the left is the Cat's Eye Nebula. That's in outer space. And doesn't this look like it could be part of the bottom here? That's the glial inside your brain. So when I say you're the artists and the astronauts, look at that. Tell me that that's not close to being what you are. The artists and astronauts of the students. You guide us, you direct us, you give us the colors to paint our life. Thank you for being the teachers that you are. Thanks. Do you want me to take questions, or do you guys want some questions? Yeah, Terry.
I would like to hear from your point of view the difference between compassion and empathy.
You got it. Empathy. Okay, the first name I want to give you is Tanya Singer, Dr. Tanya Singer. In a September-October 2013 Science article, and you can get the Science article online. If you can't get it to me, I have it. You can't get it, I have a PDF. Email me. Go to chriskukk.com or wherever those. You can get me on any of those. On the right-hand side. She's the one that kind of went to my mind on this. So she had an fMRI machine. That's a functional MRI machine. And so she had people think in terms of empathy. And she saw one part of the brain light up. And she was like, that's the same part of the brain that pain lights up. And so she had them think in a compassionate way. And by the way, you can teach compassion. And I have plenty of studies to show you how to do that and backing that up. And then she found out that, oh my gosh, it's the different parts of the brain that light up, and it's for love. And when you feel empathy for someone, you're stepping into their emotion. I call it the emotional quicksand, because sometimes you get down, you get sucked into their emotion. It's feeling the emotion that person's going through. That's empathy. Compassion is feeling kindness, caring for someone else. To me, this is what some of the best nurses can do. They don't get empathetic, they get compassionate. Right? That's a calling. It's like teaching. Nursing is a calling all of itself. And so that feeling of kindness and caring, compassion for me is defined as a 360-degree holistic understanding of the suffering or problem of another. So it's this, you get it from many different perspectives and even from disciplines. And then you take action to resolve that problem or suffering. Empathy is feeling the emotion. Compassion is poetry in motion. It's taking that idea of doing something. You're not staying static. You're not staying stuck. You're figuring your way through. And what I try to teach my students, I on a semester basis, I always teach political economy. It's the connections between different disciplines that gives you a broader picture. That's why I'm also the director of honors. You have to take, I take sociology, I take biology, I take chemistry, I take economics. You smash them together like the Super Hadron Collider. And then you just watch it go, right? And they're going to then do that too. They take that on. And compassion is that. Compassion is not being satisfied that, oh, I got the feeling. It's no, I've got to know all the way around this issue and this problem and step forward to do something about it. To be honest with you, it's like love. With my wife, if she would be happier with somebody else, I'd rather she be with somebody else. That's how much I love her. It's not going to die, how much I love her. It won't go away. But man, when you're in empathy, you can get stuck and down. So I just had a couple of talks I gave with Dr. Bernie Siegel. And he now, I was kind of his warm-up before his talk. And he changed his talk right after mine. And there is no such thing as compassion burnout. It's empathy because of what we now know about the science, what happens in the brain. It's pretty powerful. And Dr. Bernie Siegel is one of my heroes. You know, I follow his stuff all the time. And so for me to be going on the same stage before him was an honor, but I was scared. To be straight, when I put up that equation, I was like, okay, here we go. It's all or nothing. And I was very fortunate. Danbury Hospital had me speak to their neurosurgeons and others, and everyone's like, why didn't we think of that? It's right in front of us, and it's just somebody from outside looking in who has a passion. I love this. Teaching is everything to me, and I can't imagine. I was going to be an assistant district attorney. My dad was a New York City detective. My dad was going to catch the bad guys, and I was going to put the bad guys away for life. That was my goal. In undergrad, one of my professors left on a Fulbright, and he asked me if I would take over the class. That's when I was like, oh my gosh, you get paid to do this? That's cool. You get to learn constantly. You get to read, and they send you books for free? Come on, this is awesome. This doesn't get better than this. And compassion is taking that passion of wanting to do something. But then you're not just going to, we all know passionate idiots. Like, we're going to run into walls. No, it's this understanding. It's getting the knowledge, diving deep, and acting. Right? And empathy is that I'm there to help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes?
Do people need a basis of or the ability to have empathy to reach compassion?
I love this question because it goes back to this guy, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, famous for The Social Contract, right? And Rousseau, many of his French writings just got translated in the last 5 years. And I bought a slew of them off of Amazon because I wasn't sure how long they'd be around. And I hit the mother lode of gold of Rousseau. Rousseau argued well before anybody else. And I believe Darwin kind of built on the same idea. Rousseau said, all of us are born with, his words, natural compassion. But society is set up and structured that we unlearn that natural compassion. Think about it. When I said survival of, you all said the fittest, and you were absolutely wrong. Right? Darwin did not say that, but our culture makes that happen in our brains. It's that we're born with that natural compassion. It's simply to ignite it. It's simply to get it back. It's simply to structure society that, for example, for me, there should be more, as much at least, of cooperative activities in a classroom and in schools as there are competitive. Imagine if there was more collaborative work, right? And instead of a lot more of the competitive nature. You bring that idea back. I think everybody has it. It's in us. It's setting it up, right? I was deathly afraid of school until Mrs. P. Right? Anytime I saw a nun with the habit, the flying nun, I literally was more afraid of them than anything else in the world. And it was just, that's the way I was structured. When Mrs. P then showed me what a classroom could be like, and the main problem is I had a problem with maps, with latitude and longitude. For some reason, I couldn't just get it until Mrs. P said, well, how do you see it? And I see down lines and across lines. And all she did was neuroscience. That's what she didn't call it, but she used association. She goes, okay, latitude is across. Okay? And longitude, the O, is down. That rocks my world. I associate everything. That's why I use quotes, to be honest with you. I memorize a lot of things because I assign them to quotes. That's the way I think. And paradoxes. I love paradoxes. So every chapter in my children's book is based on paradoxes. And that's neuroscience. That's John Medina. He shows we learn the best, actually through smell, but you can't have smells all the time, right? And so it's emotion and paradoxes. Every single child, when you give them less is more, you see them, they're like, what? And then they lean in. You got them. Right? Right there, the line is tugged. And you can now teach what you want to teach. And every single classroom, that's what I go. I kind of set up like whitewater rafting. I know I got to avoid certain rocks, and I know there's an end that I got to go to. But you know what? I'm the type, that's why my wife doesn't go with me. I like my raft overturned. I head for the rocks. And teaching's a lot like that for me. If you're not in the rocks, you got an easy ride. I'm not so sure you're getting too much out of it at all. Yeah. Anything else? No? Well, I want to also thank you for staying, guys. You had a long, long day, so thank you. Thanks.